You've probably heard older people say things like, "Kids these days just don't understand," or "When I was younger, we did things differently." It's something that happens in every generation, where older people look at the youth and criticize their behavior, their choices, or the way they live. But why does this happen so consistently? Are today's young people really so different from older generations, or is there something deeper going on? Let's break it down in a way that's easy to understand and relatable. First off, it's important to realize that one of the main reasons older generations criticize younger ones is because of change. Think about it, the world is constantly evolving. Technology, fashion, communication, and even the way we work are always shifting. Older generations grew up with a different set of tools, habits, and expectations. For example, baby boomers didn't have smartphones or the internet when they were young. They communicated face-to-face or by phone, and work often meant staying at one job for years, maybe even decades. Today, Gen Z and millennials live in a world where everything is fast-paced and digital. We can chat with someone across the globe instantly, find jobs online, and switch careers more frequently than in the past. When older people see these changes, it can feel like the world they knew is disappearing. It's not that they don't want progress, but more that the pace of change can be overwhelming. Imagine being in your 60s or 70s and seeing an entirely new way of life forming around you, one that you may not fully understand. It can feel alienating, and because of that, older generations sometimes react by criticizing the new things they don't relate to, like social media or the gig economy. Another big factor is nostalgia. Have you ever noticed how people tend to look back on their past with rose-colored glasses? It's a psychological phenomenon known as rosy retrospection. Older generations often remember their youth as the good old days, where life seemed simpler and better. They might forget the struggles or challenges they faced back then and only remember the positives. When they compare those memories to the present, they feel like today's youth have it easier or aren't living up to the same standards. But here's the thing, every generation has its own set of challenges. For instance, baby boomers dealt with the pressures of the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. Millennials, on the other hand, faced the 2008 financial crisis, skyrocketing student debt, and a housing market that feels impossible to break into. When older generations say things like, "We didn't complain as much," they often forget the economic, social, and political challenges that today's young people are up against. On top of that, each generation is shaped by different values and priorities, which can lead to misunderstandings. For example, baby boomers often value stability and long-term commitment. They grew up in a world where getting a job and staying with one company for decades was seen as the ideal path. Younger generations, especially millennials and Gen Z, prioritize flexibility and work-life balance. They're more likely to switch jobs or even careers to find something fulfilling. This isn't laziness or a lack of commitment as it's often portrayed, but rather a response to a world where job security is no longer guaranteed. You see this clash of values in how different generations approach topics like mental health, social justice, and the environment. Younger people are more open about their mental health struggles and are actively fighting for climate change policies and racial equality. Some older people may view this as too idealistic or overly dramatic because they grew up in a time when these issues weren't as openly discussed. But again, it's just different priorities, not better or worse. The media plays a huge role in amplifying these differences. Stories about the so-called entitled millennials or lazy Gen Z are everywhere. You see headlines that say things like millennials are killing the housing market, but these often ignore the fact that younger people simply can't afford homes the way older generations did. The media loves to pit generations against each other because it creates drama, but it also creates unnecessary friction between young and old. Now let's talk about the workplace. One place where generational conflicts really come to the surface is on the job. Older workers might see younger employees using more flexible work schedules or relying heavily on technology and feel like they aren't putting in the same effort. But from the younger person's perspective, they're just working smarter, not harder. They're using new tools to make work more efficient and to balance their personal lives, which is incredibly important in a world that's always connected So is there any truth to these criticisms? Yes and no. It's true that the younger generations are different, but that doesn't mean they're worse. They just live in a different world. Older generations had their struggles, and so do we. It's just that those struggles look different. For example, back in the day, you could go to college without taking on massive debt. But today's students graduate with tens of thousands of dollars in loans, while older generations could often buy homes in their 20s. Many younger people can't even afford a down payment until much later in life, if at all. At the end of the day, the criticism from older generations often comes down to fear of change, misunderstandings about new values, and nostalgia for a simpler time. But it's important to remember that every generation has something valuable to offer. Older generations bring experience and wisdom, while younger ones bring fresh ideas and innovation. If we can bridge the gap and understand each other's perspectives, there's a lot to gain from working together.